Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Welcome to Politics Done Right on KPFT 90.1 FM, your community radio station. We have a great program for you today. The title of the show is A Talk with Black Lives Matter Activists in the Woodlands, Texas, Violence on the Choice Movement, and GOP Failures and Fraud. Okay, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has all but given the green light to Democrats to give Americans the policies they want. He said, we are not going to talk about touching the Trump tax cut scam. We're not going to talk about doing things that Americans really say they want. So therefore, why do we need to negotiate with the Republicans? So Democrats got the green light. Get busy. We speak to BLM activists David Shontz and Charlie Lindahl, two white men in the Woodlands, Texas, who explain the reason for their commitment to the movement. Also, Republican operative Miles Taylor came out swinging against the Republican Party on the Cross connection with Tiffany Cross. He told the inconvenient truth, and one hopes Republicans, thinking Republicans, good Republicans, are actually listening to what he had to say. Julie Burkhart discussed the hard work of counteracting the opposition and violence currently facing the choice movement. She was once one of the partners of Tiller, Dr. Tiller, who was murdered by the right wing, if you remember that, several years ago. And lastly, President Trump and his Republican sycophants are the masters of projection. It turns out voter fraud is from Trumpsters, not anywhere else. A person got convicted yesterday, and there's several more in the chain. But before we get started, please remember to keep your community radio station, KPFT, in your minds. Talk about it. Tell your friends to tune into 90.1 FM Houston or listen at kpft.org. Likewise, keep our 100,000 watt station that covers the entire Southeast Texas on air by donating what you can afford at our website, kpft.org. Lastly, remember, you can get Politics Done Right Mondays through Fridays on Facebook Live at facebook.com/Politics Done Right. Again, that is facebook.com/Politics Done Right, or on YouTube Live at politicsdoneright.com/YouTube. That is politicsdoneright.com/YouTube. Please do not forget to follow me on Twitter for updates. My handle is Egberto Willies, at Egberto Willies. Egberto Willies is spelled EGBERTOWILLIES as in Sam. Again, that is EGBERTOWILLIES. But folks, let's get busy. McConnell all but told Democrats, look guys, go it alone, because you know what? We are not going to do anything we don't want to do, and we're not going to allow you to do anything you don't want to do. I want you to listen to this, and then let's take it on the other side.
Summing it up, we're happy to take a look at an infrastructure package that's what basically both sides agree is infrastructure, and we're not willing to pay for it by undoing the 2017 tax bill.
Understand what that is saying. The 2017 tax bill was passed with reconciliation, meaning Democrats did not have to get the 60 vote margin. No Democrat voted for that bill. So that tax bill, the 2017 tax bill, that's how it was passed. All right. He is telling Democrats, the only thing we will agree on in your jobs bill is what we commonly define as infrastructure. Not what you think infrastructure is, what we think infrastructure is. In other words, if the common denominator is what we agree on, it only means that, and not compromise, it only means that Republicans will only pass what Republicans support. They won't compromise. In other words, we agree, the Democrats want more, they want less. So instead of meeting in the middle, they're saying we only will agree to less, what we want. So they passed a huge tax cut with no input from Democrats, and they want Democrats now to reduce their infrastructure bill, to leave their tax cut alone, even though Democrats are saying we'll compromise and just take back some of that tax cut. And that applies for every single Democratic policy that Americans say they want. Look, there's not a competition here. The American people have spoken. They have overwhelmingly elected this president. The policies that this president is now advocating for, the vast majority of Americans say they want it. Why should Democrats put themselves in a less than optimal position? Why should Democrats give people less than they promised in order to support the people that most people don't support? Democrats need to see this as the green light to go ahead and pass policies that Americans say they want, else 2022 will be a lot more difficult than it needs to be. Americans need to see things working for them. I'm here with two white guys. Let me tell you why I started it this way. Because that one with a beard, he called me up and said, Egberto, why aren't you out here in the Woodlands? We are having a Black Lives Matter rally. And I said, in the Woodlands? And Charlie said, yeah, man, we're out here doing stuff. So anyhow, let me first introduce you guys to Charlie Lindahl and David Shontz. David, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Egberto, it's great to be on with you.
Hey, look, it's great to have you. And I tell you, for me, what I'm seeing here as a black guy, and Charlie will tell you, Charlie and I go back a very long time. For a longest time, I never got into the racial politics because as a black person, I didn't want to be a black blogger or a black journalist or anything of that nature. But things have changed so much that, we've all had to immerse ourselves into this domain. And Charlie told me that this group out there in the Woodlands, an area that is mostly white, had a group of people that every so often, and I think you're saying every 2 weeks, were out there rallying with the Black Lives Matter moniker. First of all, David, tell me a little bit about yourself and tell me why you got involved.
Well, I've been a member of Northwoods Unitarian Universalist Church for many years, over 20 years, and am now the chair of the Social, Economic, and Environmental Justice Committee, which also includes racial justice in its purview. Mm-hmm. And this is something that we've had ministers talk with us about and bring up of racial justice. The Unitarian Universalist organization itself went through kind of an internal discernment process about their own hiring practices and employment practices relating to racial justice, and has really tried to take on a new level of anti-racism. And I was very inspired by that, and wanted to help, wanted to do something ourselves. And this is something that we came up with that we could do. It's an act of public witness.
Well, look, I'm happy to hear that. Now, Charlie, we go back a long time, as I said, and one of the things I want to ask you personally, because there are several times we've had discussions on race privately. And you've come to me before and said, hey, do you think what I'm doing here is the right thing to do? And I've always told you, if it's coming from the heart, it's the right thing. If you're willing to learn, it's always the right thing. What gave you the passion that says, you know what, I'm this white guy, but and in fact, you used to call yourself the older white guy or something like that.
Old white guy, OWG, yeah.
Right. And that's what you used to call yourself. And then you said, but I want to make a difference. What got you into I mean, you could sit down and live a comfortable life and not worry about things. Why did you want to immerse yourself in this?
Well, I'll start with genetics. I come from a family of preachers and teachers, and particularly on my mother's side. My grandfather was a Presbyterian minister who actually went over to during the war. He was a chaplain over there, and he organized one of the first interdisciplinary ministries in the military over in Japan, to get all of the faiths together, to work together, all of them. And that's one of my inspirations, is my grandfather. But just in general, I know that I can't say that I've experienced the kind of racial treatment of racism personally as a white guy, but I can as a geek. Being a geek in the middle of most educational settings where you're very socially awkward and you feel like you're ostracized a lot and you're talked about as odd and all that kind of stuff, that affected me a whole lot. And when I see this happening with racism, I'm like, this is not right. What can I do? And the short answer is, and I know David agrees with this and you do too, to me, the most important part of activism is showing up.
Believe it or not, that is true. Now, yeah, continue. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that to follow on, it's basically giving a face to the fact that we have a group in the Woodlands. And I think we had, what, 25 people there the last time, David, for example?
Let's see. It was 18 the last time we were
18?
the last time we've been together. Usually it's between 10 and 20.
Yeah, but the point is, we're actually showing our faces out in public in a very public area. We're at a bridge that's only a mile away from one of the richest malls in Texas, and just sitting there with signs. We're not screaming, we're not yelling, we're not doing anything crazy. We're just sitting there quietly and showing our signs and passing it to people and so forth, showing nonviolence, showing that there are people in the Woodlands that support, that understand the need for things to change.
Now, let me ask you.
That's it.
Yeah, let me ask David this, because one of the things is understanding that there is a problem. The other thing is being able to empathize with the problem and understand why these issues arise. What do you see, David, as the problem in the country racially right now?
I think that as from the white perspective on this, that we have to recognize, well, I was raised and went through the times of, it was just after the civil rights movement. And the point of that time was that we shouldn't see color, that we're all the same and we want to be equal. And we tried that for a good long time and made some progress with it, changed some laws, but it became apparent, particularly during and after the Obama administration, that us white folks, we see color immediately before we even think about it. So, Egberto, you as a black man don't get to choose whether I see you as black or not. I see you that way immediately before I think about it. So, the problem right now is for us as white people to internalize that we see color and we do treat people differently, and that we can take action to resist that. We have to actively push back against our culture in order to be anti-racist. If you just go along to get along, you're complicit in the racism that happens today. So we have to push back.
I am so happy you talked about the first time, you see me, the first thing you see is that graphic. I'm a black man. The first thing I see of you is you're a white person or whatever. And there are adjustments that's made right there. I go into a white establishment. I know that I'm going to be followed and I behave accordingly. All of us have learned a particular pattern of behavior because of how we were culturized. Now, earlier, Charlie, you talked about being a geneticist or having genetic knowledge of genes. And I don't want to bring this too much into the argument, but the reason I'm bringing that in is that we all know that race is a social construct.
Mhm.
Your intelligence, my intelligence on all of that has very little to do with pigmentation, but has a whole lot more to do with culturalization, etc. We know that.
Sure.
How do you think it is best with what you guys are doing
Mhm.
to actually put that into play, that people understand that, as opposed to them following on to that first reaction that came to them from the time they were culturalized through our advertising and everything else? In other words, how do we get rid of using the carnal brain and going forward from there?
Well, first of all, it's as David or as David stated, being aware of it. That's the first thing. The second thing is, how do you start to fix things? And the first place to start, and I know sounds like platitudes, but I'll just go ahead and say it. The place to start is yourself. So, for example, I'm over in, and I've seen a number of times that this has happened. I'll be in a long line at somewhere, I don't care, grocery store, whatever. And I see an older Black person, or just a Black person behind me. And I just say, here, you go first. Just a simple courtesy thing. And a lot of times they kind of look at me like, okay, and they go. Or I'm waiting in a line that's not very well defined, and the clerk looks at me and says, okay, what do you want? And I go, oh no, look at them first. Just very, very simple stuff like that.
I tell you something, Charlie, I want to interrupt you because I mean, that, you know, you just said that is very simple stuff, right?
Yeah.
But those are the little things that Black folk actually have to, you just meant the first one I get, the second one is even more profound. Why?
Yeah.
I've gone into stores first, and
Yeah.
somebody like you come into the store and immediately you got the privilege to be
Right.
first.
Exactly.
And you acknowledge that, and you tell the person, hey, that is not what happened. Let's all be fierce. I mean, those little things, and I'm glad you actually said that, because people don't get that. It's not always the big things. The big things are systemic and structural. Redlining is systemic and structural. The way police officers deal with Black bodies are systemic and structural. But there are the little things that, as you just said, the average person can do. You want to build up on that, David?
Yeah, I think it's maybe not so much about being well, polite certainly, but not extra nice, but noticing when we take that internally first, noticing your own reaction, and not judging it, but noticing your own reaction, and then being aware of how other people are reacting, so that if that clerk, if you've got the Black person approaching the counter and the clerk is looking past them to you as the white person, then you defer and say, oh no, you were here first. And doesn't necessarily have to be a racial discussion, but that you have noted to yourself and to them that they weren't seeing. So it's very much about seeing.
That, I mean, I'm, you know, there are people who've written about the invisibility of being Black. So that is a lot in that concept. Well, I tell you what, tell us a little bit about your march or your rallies that you do in the Woodlands, and how do you publicize it, and what do you want to accomplish for it? How long are you going to do it? Tell us a little bit about that.
Go ahead, Dan.
That's a good segue there, because Ibrahim X. Kendi said that the difference between a demonstration and a protest is sustained effort. That our will is to keep doing this until something changes, and we've been doing it for a year now. So we come out every 2 weeks. It's mostly church-based, but we actually publicize to some other groups. I want to give a specific shout out to Sheree McWilliams. She has a Facebook page for Black Lives Matter, attracts attention of all kinds. And she has come out with us on several occasions and shared with us. We also have folks coming out from the Woodlands Coalition for Equality. And anybody that's sympathetic is willing to join us. Anybody that's not sympathetic is certainly welcome to have a dialogue with us, as long as we're all comfortable and civil. And I think that's, we're prepared for that. We are performing an act of public witness, so we're out there for that.
Excellent. I'll put all the information about your event in the blog that goes along with this as well. Charlie, what you want to add to that?
Oh, what I wanted to say is that, let's see, where was I going with that?
Well, while you were thinking,
the preparation, we have preparation. We have a lot of discussion ahead of time saying, what happens if we run across somebody that's been, that's openly hostile? How do we handle it? And we have rehearsed what will happen there. We're going to make sure that we do not react with anger. We do not react with, we don't push back with any kind of, name calling or anything like that. And we also very much are aware of our legal rights, both in the state and locally and in the Woodlands. What are we allowed to do? We only do it on this particular bridge. That is a public space, period, end of story. So we've done our homework in terms of preparation in case something should happen, which so far it hasn't.
Well, look, I want to close this by asking you two guys, as two white guys, a very important, first, a very important question. Right now, in order to divide and separate folks, a lot of the right has targeted white men, white young men, white older men. And what they're trying to do is, because white men have been the dominant factor in our economic structure in just about every part of our structure, they want you to feel like you're losing something by others gaining something. What can both of you, what can your movement do to make sure that that isn't cauterized into the minds of white boys that are coming up? Because that is a sort of message that they're getting to these guys. Hey guys, these guys are trying to take your birthright away. Let's start with you, David.
This is very, very important, Egberto. The first principle of Unitarian Universalism is that every person has inherent worth and dignity. In short, all lives matter. What we're about is that all lives will matter when everyone is treated with the same dignity and respect, and that's not happening now. If there's one thing that I would want my skin folk, my other white men like me to understand, is that this is not a zero-sum game, like you've been told over and over. This is not a zero-sum game. By lifting up people who've been oppressed, in this case, Black people, we release ourselves from that burden of playing the role of the oppressor. That it is good for us, it's good for everybody. Yes, different people will benefit differently, but everyone is lifted up when we oppose oppression.
Charlie?
Well, one of the things I'd like to suggest, and this is, by the way, I know you expressed this in your book as well, going back to zero-sum game thing, also is whenever you're dealing with someone that apparently doesn't agree with you, what you try and do is find points of agreement. And here's the point of agreement. I, as a white person, know that I'm giving something up. I know it, and I freely do it. I am willing to share. I have more than enough for myself. I am absolutely and great and happily will give up some of my power, privilege, whatever, to help others. I have so much of it. I have plenty to spare. I don't mind giving it away. And that counters that argument about, oh, they're taking it away. Yes, they are. I am giving it to them. Here's why.
I want to add a corollary to that because it's important. And the corollary to giving up the privilege is you are really giving up what all of us should really have. In other words, it shouldn't be thought of as I have the right to give you the privilege, but what it is supposed to be. As long as we see it that way. Look,
I agree.
David, Shontz, and Charlie Lindahl, my brother from another mother. It's been my pleasure to have both of you on Politics Done Right. I think what you're doing makes for a better world, and you're improving where we are at this point. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Many Republicans, honest Republicans, Republicans that most of us disagree with, they're finally seeing the light. More than seeing the light, they're outspoken about it with the expectation that others will listen. I want you to listen to Miles here. Good Republican. Listen to what he has to say, then we'll take it on the other side.
So something that you keep saying, the Republican Party has become, and I'm saying the Republican Party has always been. You know, we can totally parse Ronald Reagan's record on these things, and you know, yeah, he made that comment, but he also, his policies were incredibly damaging to Black people and other people of color in this country. So I want to hone in on that, because I do think that's part of the problem, right? Like, there are these ideological differences, and everyone wants to say, oh, Trump turned the party this way. The party has always been this way. So again, I'm curious from you, Miles, knowing that these things exist, you know, you're somebody who wanted to be able to say to your kids, you donated to the first Black president, you contributed to Barack Obama. Principles that you echo, I do still think run contrary to the support and health and benefit of people of color in this country. How do you reconcile those two things?
Well, look, I'd say the Republican Party was born as the party of Lincoln, right? That freed slaves around this country. And of course, there's been periods where the party's become one that's xenophobic. And I think we're seeing that period again. I mean, you and I, Tiffany, would disagree on the history of the Republican Party. I'd say the reason that Ronald Reagan was elected in a historic landslide is that people saw that his efforts to cut regulation and empower the people were actually benefiting people all across the country. But I think the important thing now, Tiffany, is not the civil and constructive dialogue you and I are able to have about disagreements between Democrats, traditional Democrats, and traditional Republicans. It's we're now fighting about absolutely fundamental aspects of our country: commitment to democracy, rule of law, the Constitution. Those are things that Republicans stand against now, and that's what's terrifying. So you and I should continue to debate whether traditional Republican or traditional Democratic policies are better for America. But far more important debate right now is at least one of those parties, the Republican Party, no longer agrees in the middle ground about foundational unifying things that should bring this country together. Terrifying. And I would end with saying right now, the biggest anti-democratic force in this country and the biggest danger to our republic is actually the Republican Party of today itself. That's why it needs to be reformed. And that's one place where I think Democrats and rational, principled Republicans on the center right can come together and say, we've got to save our country from this. We've got to rebuild the political center, and we need a common sense coalition once again in the United States.
Like I've said several times, the Republican Party has become a clear and present danger to the United States. The fact that they cannot really all condemn an insurrection, the fact that they cannot really tell the truth about anything anymore, the fact that they are unwilling to have a true discussion on real issues. In other words, we are talking about what type of policies we want to make the lives better of the middle class and the poor. They're speaking about cancel culture. They're talking about books and catalogs and issues that really have nothing in common with what the average person needs. So here's the thing. When a party reaches this stage, two things can happen. We can go down into turmoil if people don't take a stand, and good for Miles that he's taking a stand on the party, or it becomes a completely defunct party, in which case we have a one-party system, and that isn't good for America either. We need to have a discussion of ideas, and ideas must be tested. So let's hope that those people who are questioning the GOP right now, those people who are checking to make sure that we're not going to sit back and just take it, that these people will see the better light and bring back a conservative party that is worth having a discussion with. Today we have a special guest. As you know what's happening in Texas, what's happening all over the country, not only with insurgents, not only with all these different issues, but also with an issue dear to the hearts of many women. Today, we're lucky to have Julie A. Burkhart, founder and CEO of Trust Women. She's a former advisor to Dr. Tiller. Yes, that Dr. Tiller. And has led the fight for choice in legislatures, courtrooms, and at front lines of reproductive justice has been at the front line of reproductive justice for the last 3 decades. Julie Burkhart, welcome to Politics Done Right. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, Edberto. It's really nice to be here. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. But, before we get into talking about the organization that you're in, let's talk a little bit about what's happening in this country. We have turned into a pretty darn violent country, wouldn't you say? Or maybe we have always been. What's the case?
Well, I would say yes, and yes, that we have always had violence in this country. Some of it, I would say, has been less visible, or people haven't paid attention to certain violence in this country. And then most certainly, over the past several years, violence has risen in this country. And especially, I was just recently reading a Wall Street Journal article, I believe it was the Wall Street Journal, that was talking about the rise of violence and what we've seen in this country, especially since President Barack Obama was elected, and then subsequently Donald Trump coming into office.
Yeah, Donald Trump kind of really pushed a lot of buttons. He always talked about he was able to get to the bad part of the carnality of humans because he was able to bring out all the things that people were scared of or the misinformed. He was just good at that. Now, one of the issues is that right now we have a lot of this violence coming from the right side, and it so happened that the right side has a lot of issues with women. It has a lot of issues with colorization, race. It has a lot of these other issues. How has that impacted you in your life proper?
Well, I can say in recent years, there have been a couple of incidents that have just been chilling. One was the very night that Donald Trump was elected. Our clinic in Wichita, Kansas was vandalized and someone actually broke in. And this was a person who identifies as anti-choice. And that was just not a great way to begin knowing that we were going to have this right-wing president coming in to the White House. It was chilling at best. Also, just recently, we had a gentleman show up at our clinic in Oklahoma City, and that's where we have our 2 clinics. He showed up at our Oklahoma City clinic with an automatic rifle, a pistol, and knives strapped to his body. And that was chilling as well. I was scared to death for the staff, our patients coming in and out, and of course, we had to involve law enforcement in that.
Now, was he on the public portion, on the sidewalks or something, meaning not on your property?
Yes, he was in the public right of way, but he was his his body and then his messaging was aimed towards people who were on our property and at the clinic.
I don't want to get into the guns issue here, but don't you find it ironic that rightfully based on the laws, I imagine in Oklahoma, likewise the laws here in Texas and many other red states, these guys have all the rights to load themselves up with guns and stand right in front of your place, becoming a menace legally. What do you think about that?
Well, absolutely, because when we called the police, he was open carrying and he was well within his rights, even though his intent was to put the fear of God in those of us at the clinic who, patients and staff alike. There was no positivity in his presence at our facility. It was only that to harass and intimidate.
Let's talk a little bit about your past experience with Dr. George Tiller. Tell us a little bit about your feelings there.
I will say that I miss him every day. He was just one of the best people I've ever worked with. I have a sign on my wall there that he actually gave me that was hanging on his wall at one point when I worked for him. He, his spirit was one of compassion and giving the best medical care to people that he could. And, one thing that he would just say very simply is that, people need a little help every now and then. And he felt that his job was to give people that help. I would also say that this, the abortion field for him was something that came calling for him. He did not go looking for that. Just the way that evolved in his life. He was actually going to be a dermatologist, if you can imagine that.
Amazing, yeah.
Which is, a little more low key than being an abortion provider. But because of the way things worked out in his family, and then patients coming and calling, asking him, that's the way his life worked out, that professional path. He believed that, he would always say, I'm a woman educated physician. And, women are able to make difficult, complex decisions for themselves and come to reasonable conclusions. And so he looked at himself more as a facilitator.
I find it amazing that for the people there are a lot of people that, first of all, let me ask it this way. A lot of people frowned on abortions. Why shouldn't they frown on abortions? Give an explanation to those people who frown on the practice and why they shouldn't.
Well, I would say one reason is that you never know how your life is going to unfold. And so here, there are a couple of examples. In talking with people who would identify as, say, Republican, maybe more to the right, people who would say, I'm pro-life, I'm anti-choice, I don't believe in abortion. Well, if you dig deeper sometimes into those conversations, you find that those people actually have been faced with having to make that decision. Just recently in talking, with some gentlemen who their partners had abortions. One definitely was, there was a fetal abnormality and their baby was not going to survive. I forget what the other reason was, but those are two prime examples of you just never know. You never know how life is going to unfold. And so therefore, we need to leave that right up to each individual in consultation with their family, friends, medical professionals, if they wish, to make these decisions for themselves.
Now, for those who have the issue that is a life, now let me tell you, my personal opinion is that I am personally too dumb to know where life begins unless a baby is born. That's my honest opinion. And my second opinion is that I can't have a kid. It's presumptuous of me as a man to really tell a woman who has, I don't want to call it a burden, but who has that responsibility to try to dictate what she's going to do. Not only that, as a political activist, I understand that given that I can't have kids and women can, and that everything in this economy has some sort of a financial repercussion for which a government doesn't really give the kind of aid that it should. It definitely should be a woman's choice. Now, first, let me know how do you handle the part, is it a life or it is not a life? And secondly, from an economic standpoint.
Well, and I think that's where, like you were saying, we all have our very different opinions about when life begins, or what that life means. And so that's yet just another reason why people should be left to make these decisions in private, with, the people that they want to surround themselves with. That can be based on, just your own personal feeling. It could be based on your religious background, your, spirituality. That's tricky. And that's where, definitely when women are coming in and we're doing our consultations, which some people call counseling, with them and talking, some people have this question, but that is a question for them to answer that we could not answer for them, because abortion is so personal and private. We can't make that decision. And then, yes, from an economic standpoint, if someone's wanting to, say, finish their college career, and taking care of a child or another child, that could put too much of a strain on them in the moment to be able to finish that career in college, to be able to advance, to then provide a better life for their children, subsequent children. We have a very patchwork childcare system where it's challenging if you have a baby or a toddler or a small child, to be able to afford to put them in that daycare or childcare center. So there are a lot of considerations that go into women's decision making. And also what I want to say is, in this part of the country where we have our clinics, 70% of the people who come and see us for abortion care, 70% are already parents. And so oftentimes what we hear is, those folks will say, I'm just trying to make a good decision for the children that I already have and that I love dearly, and I want them to have a good life.
Yeah, it is amazing because, I mean, when you talk about the patchwork of, we have problems in Congress getting laws passed for good child care. We have people want to get to work, they need child care. We don't offer that. But even most importantly, what we find is that we somehow want to control women as far as whether they should or not carry a child. But after that child is born, the policies that are necessary to support that child to make sure they live, many times it's not there and they die, isn't it? So there are a lot of things to look in that regards. Okay, tell us a little bit about Trust Women.
Yeah, I would love to. So I founded Trust Women in July of 2009, just a few short weeks after, as you had referenced, my former boss and mentor, Dr. George Tiller, had been assassinated. I fortunately had some just wonderful friends and family and colleagues coming to me and saying, okay, what are we going to do now? How are we going to bounce back from this? Not that you can, I believe, ever fully bounce back from a tragic death like that, but how are we going to fill this space so that we don't give these right-wing extremists the final say? We're not going to sit down and shut up because they took our very beloved, this very beloved person away from us. So Trust Women was born out of that. And it took about a year to really figure out the mission and vision of the organization. So I really, and I've done more political and legislative work in my career, and that's what I did for Dr. Tiller. But it became very apparent that if we also don't have points of access and we're not providing services in areas that are underserved, then we can elect all the wonderful legislators out there that we are able to and pass all the bills we want. But we need also the facilities and the ability for people to also access that care. So we went about starting up the clinic again, and we are in Dr. Tiller's former clinic in Wichita.
Or Kansas, right?
Yes, in Wichita, Kansas, which I just feel just really blessed and happy every day that we were able to make that work.
Is that the only location in Kansas? That's
No,
it.
there are 2 clinics in Kansas City that provide services. And then we also have a Planned Parenthood in Wichita, but Trust Women in this part of the state is the only medical and surgical abortion provider. So we're the only medical and surgical facility outside of Kansas City.
Wow. And you're in Oklahoma City, another state with a lot of restrictions.
Yes. And there are also 3 other providers in the state, but we're the only provider that goes up to the legal limit, which is 21.6 weeks gestation.
Mm-hmm.
So we see a lot of Texas patients as well.
I can imagine. Now, what are the states with the most severe restrictions as you recall right now?
Oh, goodness. Well, Mississippi, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana,
Texas.
Missouri, Texas.
I'm in Texas.
Let's not leave Texas off. We're actually waiting for a decision to come down from the circuit court in Texas. So I guess, for example, I was looking at a New York Times article on abortion access. It was several months ago now, but basically it came straight down the middle of the country through the Midwest and all through the Southeast. And those are the states represented that are incredibly regulated with punitive anti-choice laws.
That is sad because that has an impact. And, people in red states look for abortion too. And we know that if it's not there legally, women are going to do what women have to do to get their lives together. And those who are incapable of doing it, we've almost sentenced them to many times to economic disaster. Your point, your thoughts?
Yes, that's absolutely right. And that if we are not giving people that ability to control their own fertility and make those own decisions and choices for their lives, it's a sentence of, taking matters into their own hands, which might not be safe. Also, more poverty. The University of California, San Francisco, in one of their departments, they've recently, it's not recent, but they've done a turnaway study and just looking at the outcomes for women who have been turned away from abortion services. And so those findings are not positive for people who are not able to access those services. So it's the turnaway study, if anybody wanted to look that up.
Now, Juliet, we're coming close to the end, and what I always do with my programs is, because I know I definitely don't have all the questions or the answers for that matter, I ask you to tell me anything you want to tell me that I should have asked, but that you want to get out there.
Well, I guess going back to our original, or what we first talked about in terms of violence in America, and that rising tide of violence. We in the abortion world have faced violence for a long time, as I know other segments and groups of people have in this country. And the thing that's really important is that, and of course we are just coming off a presidency where he was all about gaslighting and encouraging this violence. But when we see these extremist groups, no matter who their hatred is targeted towards, feeding lies, the disinformation through social media. That is, giving that permission and feeding those false beliefs, that is damaging. So I wish people could just really see that, just how damaging, and I'm sorry, I'm not being very articulate on this here, but
I understand. I think everybody understands exactly what you're saying.
okay, yes, and it's and just what I or Dr. Tiller had experienced, bombings, flooding, windows shot out, knocked out, and then his ultimate assassination. And what good does that really do for us collectively as a country and a people? And so it's sad, and to be driven by such fear.
It is in fact sad. Well, Julie Burkhart, founder and CEO of Trust Women, thank you for what you do, and thank you for how you stand up to all the negative, because we do need you. So you have a wonderful day, and thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Oh, this has been a pleasure, and thank you so much.
Again, please remember to keep your community radio station, KPFT, on your minds. Talk about it. Tell your friends to tune in to 90.1 FM Houston or listen at kpft.org. Keep us on air by donating what you can afford at our website, kpft.org. Please do so in the name of Politics Done Right. Once again, remember, you can get Politics Done Right Mondays through Fridays on Facebook Live at facebook.com/Politics Done Right. Again, that is facebook.com/Politics Done Right, or on YouTube Live at politicsdoneright.com/YouTube. That is politicsdoneright.com/YouTube. Please do not forget to follow me on Twitter for updates. My handle is Egberto Willies, spelled EGBERTOWILLIES. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right, and you know how I end this baby. I am what? Out! The Republican Party has perfected the art of projection. They like to accuse others of doing a whole lot of things. They just pull it out of the air. Remember when they said the Clintons and Democrats were trading in kids or abusing kids and that sort of stuff. And they even got one of their sycophants to go to Washington and shoot up a place because he really believed what they were talking about. But instead, it is one of their representative gets who's really trafficking in teenage sex, or apparently so, or allegedly so, but there's good evidence towards it. They talk about family values, how they value families and etc. Their leader in chief, we have reports that he has paid for abortions for others, etc., etc. I mean, he's had so many different baby mamas, something that they don't associate with family values. They talk about supporting people, but the policies that they put out, that's one of the furthest things that it actually does. When we have progressives and Democrats wanting policies that allow families to stay together by giving them child care, by giving them support so that they can be there for their kids, they don't want those policies. They want you to go out there and fend for yourself. Now they're talking about voter fraud. Well, the only person convicted of voter fraud right now is somebody who voted for Donald Trump. Check this out. Pennsylvania man admits he voted for Trump with his dead mom's name. I listened too much to propaganda, he said. And this is a Washington Post article. Weeks before the election, Bruce Bartman mailed his mother's absentee ballot with a check mark next to President Donald Trump's name. The problem was his mother had been deceased since 2008. Bartman, 70, pleaded guilty on Friday to a charge of felony perjury and unlawful voting and blamed his decision to cast the fraudulent ballot on consuming too many false claims about the election. I was isolated last year in lockdown, Bartman said, while apologizing to the judge for his crime. The Associated Press reported, I listened to too much propaganda and made a stupid mistake. Samuel Streeton, Barton's attorney, added in court that his behavior was a very misguided political mistake and very stupid, according to the Philadelphia Inquirer. After sentencing him to 5 years probation, leaving him unable to vote for 4 years, Common Pleas Court Judge George A. Pagano noted that Bartman's crime goes to the heart of our democracy, according to the Inquirer, but also commended him for taking ownership. As Trump doubled down on his false claims of widespread voter fraud, especially in battleground states like Pennsylvania, Bartman's case is among the few proven instances of wrongdoing. Statewide investigations have debunked Trump's claim of broad wrongdoing and led to dozens of dismissed lawsuits. Prosecutors in half a dozen key swing states have only pursued charges in a handful of cases in addition to Barton's, the Washington Post recently reported. Now, at the end of the article, what does it say? In addition to Bartman, 2 other men in Pennsylvania face charges of fraudulently voting for Trump. So more cases are out there. But who is the fraud for? Donald Trump, according to the Inquirer. Ralph Thurman of Chester County allegedly tried to cast his son's vote, and Richard Lynn of Luzerne County allegedly attempted to obtain an absentee ballot for his deceased mother. Both cases are pending. So what is it called? Projection. The only fraud that we have right now in America is Donald Trump's fraud on America. Donald Trump's fraud on those who have put their belief, those who put their trust in a person that has no right to have the trust of any living soul on this planet. Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.